fully in charge. I think this is going to be a fun season next year. More than this, Patrick, son, can I have your take on Abu Dhabi 2023?
Yeah, this was a fun race. The final chapter of this historic season for some. Um, Max and Red Bull, like you mentioned, just the greatest single F1 season of all time, and really isn't even close. I know there's more races now than there used to be, but just an unbelievable consistency throughout the season from Max and from the Red Bull team. Basically, they were so good it allowed mediocre Sergio Perez to take P2 in the championship. That's not to say Sergio Perez is a mediocre driver. This season, he was not very good.
It was almost like a mercy end to the season. Max is the best driver in F1 in 2023. If you want to argue Lewis or Alonso or someone else might be better at another time and place, fair enough. Max is the best driver in 2023 in F1, and that Red Bull car will go down as one of the best ever. When you put those two together, I mean, you can say, well, there are more races this season. Well, extending the season even further would have just padded Max's stats, you know?
Yeah, it's pretty unreal what they were able to accomplish. But like you said, it was pretty exciting after that. We knew from the very start of the season it was going to be Max, it was going to be Red Bull. But Aston started out the season extremely well. Alonso with like 5 straight podiums or something like that to start the season. Then we saw Mercedes pick it up. Lewis Hamilton, greatest of all time, do his thing throughout the middle of the season, through most of the season, really. George Russell kind of hanging in there. And then Ferrari kind of came in late, really pushed Mercedes to the very end. And, a few hiccups here and there really kind of ended up being their downfall. It was just a couple of points that ended up separating Mercedes and Ferrari. Unfortunately for Ferrari, that's a really big loss monetarily.
But it who's the team principal there now? Fred Vasseur replaced Bonado. I mean, the strategic mistakes, the reliability issues, they were there and they were painful. And they especially harmed Charles throughout the season and then Carlos this weekend when they needed both cars. But they do seem to be getting fewer. And so I think there is a lot of hope for Ferrari next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think we say that every year. We look to the future for Ferrari, right? Oh, next year they're gonna be right there. I just every single season there's something that happens that's just so Ferrari, and it ends up costing them in the long run. But we'll see. That's a really solid driver lineup. They're both really talented. Fred Vasseur is just a guy that likes to win. He really doesn't seem like a Ferrari guy to me, which I think is probably a good thing for them.
I agree.
So, I can see next year them kind of making another step forward and improving. So hopefully, rather than Red Bull way out front, it's maybe Red Bull out front just a little bit, and then Mercedes and Ferrari again kind of go at it. Hopefully McLaren can get in there a little bit sooner with their really good lineup in Norris. There were several places in the Drivers and Constructors Championship, like you mentioned, that were sort of still up for grabs, and we actually got really good battles for both of those throughout this race. So that was a lot of fun to see.
Yeah, you mentioned McLaren. They started out very poorly, but they kept improving all year long. This week was a bit of an exception, but they've kept improving. Zach Brown, team principal, has the he's the overseer. He's got all the sponsor money coming in. They've locked up a really good driver lineup: Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. They got the good relationship with Mercedes, which, despite some of Mercedes' internal issues, pit stop issues, and some of their issues with aerodynamics, I mean, as far as engines go, they are pretty much the gold standard. McLaren's using them. They've signed a deal to use them through 2030, I think. I think things are looking up for McLaren, even more so up maybe than Ferrari.
Yeah, I think it's probably fair to say. They have sort of been a similar story since Zach Brown took over as CEO of that race team to Ferrari. And it's like, oh, we didn't quite do it this year, but next year, we have all these good things going for us. And then that's kind of what we expected for this season. And they just started out like one of the worst teams on the grid. They were woeful. It's tough to see Oscar just sort of meandering around the track in his first few races, not getting anywhere near the points. And eventually, around the middle of this season, they figured it out. They picked it up. They brought in some car upgrades and really started racing well. And you got to see the talent from Lando and Piastri. So that was really exciting. I just, for some reason, throughout the off season, somehow Ferrari and McLaren kind of frequently seem to take a step back. And it takes them a few races to get into it and to start improving the car, improving their positions. And by that point, Mercedes and Red Bull, they're out front by 50, 60, 70 points. That's tough to make up on some really good, consistent teams. So they're going to have to find a way to start the season well and maintain that form throughout the season, like Red Bull and Mercedes have been able to do over the last, decade plus.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to think is this actually Oscar Piastri's first season?
I know.
He really, is a rookie driver thrown in McLaren. He didn't come up through McLaren. I mean, he's been, just, I think, amazing.
Yeah, I think he had 2 podiums this season. And, crazy stat I heard, the last rookie driver to have a podium in Formula One was Lewis Hamilton in 2009. Like, pretty unreal. Or 2007.
Probably 7,
whatever.
yeah.
Pretty unreal that Piastri kind of was able to do that. We can, I'm not going to speculate on how well his career is going to go. Lewis Hamilton has been unbelievable, but Piastri's been so good this season as a rookie. He's looked very comfortable in that car. Kind of from the start, he looked like he was the best rookie on the grid, and the best rookie we've seen in a while. Max Verstappen, when he came through, you could tell he was fast, but he had his fair share of mistakes and sort of issues in his rookie season. And I think Piastri has really handled himself well.
Yeah, and Max was put into what is now the AlphaTauri team, which will soon be the, I think, Racing Bulls team. Zhou didn't necessarily impress us. Yuki didn't quite live up to the hype. We've got Logan Sargent this year at Williams. I know that's a tough car, but he's had issues. Yeah, Oscar's really been great. Can I get your top 5 for Abu Dhabi?
Yeah, top 5. Was a lot of fun, really interesting race, really interesting battles. I think a lot of those guys that were battling for that P4 position I have here, my top driver of the day, similar to last week, is Charles Leclerc. He did pretty much everything he could to get into that P4 position in the driver championship and force Ferrari up into P2 in the constructors championship. They didn't quite pull it off. Russell had a good race and Hamilton had a good race. Well, an acceptable race, and Sainz was very poor. Unfortunately, kind of bumped Ferrari out, but Leclerc the last couple of weeks has really just kind of taken the reins and really tried to get the team up into P2.
Yeah.
So once again, this week did a really, really good job. Was the only guy that seemed like he could even come close to matching Verstappen in qualifying and the race. Red Bull's just too good with Verstappen at the wheel.
Yeah, but with Leclerc overtaking Sergio on the final lap last week in Vegas, that was pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And this week, doing everything he can just to stick with Max. I mean, they fought from the very first lap, first turn, first lap. I mean, he's trying to get the Ferrari guy. He's like, hey, how can we figure out how do we get Carlos up? How do I help
Yeah, he was
Sergio?
trying to block off Russell
I
so
know
that Sergio could get 5 seconds on Russell, but Leclerc stay within those 5 seconds.
Right.
Because they ended up losing the constructor standings by 3 points?
I think, yeah.
Had Perez kind of been in between Russell and Leclerc, that's 3 points. So Russell would have had 12 instead of the 15 that he got from P3. So
yeah, so and he was thinking that, he was,
that's pretty remarkable to be able to do that in the middle of a race. All that information to take in.
Yep.
I heard, a transmission to his team. He was, I forget exactly what, discussing tires or something like that. And he said, oh, wait, hold on. I'm in the middle of a turn. And then, he continued his transmission to the team after that. It's pretty crazy what is happening inside of that cockpit in an F1 car and how these guys can kind of handle that all at the same time.
I mean, yeah, you just look at the steering column and you're like, what am I supposed to do with all these buttons? So they're doing that, they're racing, and they're trying to, think, how can I help my teammate? How can I help my team? How can I block this guy off? How can I do this? Pretty remarkable. All right, number 2.
Number 2, I have Yuki Tsunoda. He had a great weekend in Abu Dhabi, really trying to solidify his position in that AlphaTauri team. They had not been good this season. He was really trying to push for, I think, P7 in the constructors standings for that team, which would have been a pretty crazy finish. From even just a few races ago, it looked like they would finish probably dead last. So really good turnaround from him and from the team.
Yeah, I've been critical of Yuki. This is now his 3rd year, right? And I haven't really noticed much of an improvement. Ricardo came in there. I think Yuki maybe has outraced him, but Ricardo got thrown in at the end. But I thought Liam Lawson took it to Yuki. I know everyone likes him, but if they, found another driver, it wouldn't surprise me nor disappoint me. But yeah, the final race of the season, I thought that was, one of Yuki's best.
Yeah, it was really good to see from him. Good qualifying performance, good race from him. Kind of stood his own. P3, I have George Russell. Really good race from him. Like we mentioned, Mercedes was battling with Ferrari for that P2 in the constructors standings. Hamilton did not have a good qualifying. Really didn't have a very good race either. It was sort of up to George to really try to get as close to Leclerc as possible, and he did a good job. Just sort of let Perez go, didn't battle with him, knew that all he had to do was stay within 5 seconds over the last 5 laps of the race or however much it was. And he did his job perfectly. Just totally outperformed Lewis this weekend, which, we have not said very often throughout Hamilton's career. So really, really good job from George.
Yeah. And, Mercedes has been, and Lewis especially, has been bad mouthing this car all year long, all last year as well, very publicly. And, they finished in P2. It's the second best car, let's say, or close. But it was a distant P2. And if you're sort of the champagne team that Mercedes has been for a decade, you think P1 is your rightful place. But I do think because of the history and because it was Lewis Hamilton, George Russell gets overlooked. But I mean, he's the only race winner for Mercedes in 2 years. He is equal to Lewis in qualifying. I think it went 11-11. Or it was close. Lewis did do better in racing, but it's Lewis Hamilton, and George had at least a couple DNFs that weren't his fault. I think the future for Mercedes is well set. I think they're going to improve that car. George Russell's just getting better, so I do think he gets overshadowed by Lewis Hamilton, but he's a great driver.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. That was P3. P4, I have Lando Norris. Really had a strong second half of the season. Tried to get up to P4 in the driver's standings. He's another one of those 4 guys that was right there at the end. Pretty much did everything he could in this race to maximize his point total, and only ended up 1 point behind Alonso and Leclerc in that battle. So from a really, really terrible start to the season for McLaren, Lando made up a lot of ground later on in the season, and this was just another really, really solid performance from him.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I sort of didn't overlook Lando, given I was looking at Charles and Max battles, Alonso getting into finishing 4th, seeing Yuki do his best. So I think I didn't really pay as much attention to Lando, but yeah, that was a good race.
And then lastly, the final guy, he did end up getting P4 in the driver's standings. At one point, it looked like he could even be P2 in the drivers' championship, but that Aston would not let him. Fernando Alonso, he made sure he got just enough points to pull out the P4 in an Aston Martin team that seemed like way down the order. I think they must have ended P5 in the constructors, right?
I think just ahead of McLaren?
Just behind
they were just
McLaren,
behind McLaren. Right. But yeah, and that I mean,
just unreal from a 40-something-year-old guy who's been racing for like 2 decades at this point. It's just remarkable what he was able to accomplish.
And it's not even just that he's in his 40s. I mean, the standings went, for drivers: Red Bull, Mercedes, Alonso, Ferrari. I mean, like let's not
Ferrari, McLaren, Ferrari.
Right. Let's not mince words. Right. It was Alonso did all of that for Aston. It was just so distant. Lance Stroll was just so far behind his teammate.
Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren. Aston. Yeah, there were a lot of guys between Alonso and Stroll in the standings.
So that's a good one. So you've got Leclerc, Yuki, George Russell, Lando Norris, and Fernando Alonso as your top 5. That is excellent. What was your best surprise of Abu Dhabi 2023, Patrick?
We've been talking about a lot of it. I think Yuki was a great story here. Logan Sargent did not have a good qualifying, obviously didn't even set a lap, but he had an okay race. So, some of these guys where you're a little bit concerned about their future in the sport, I think they finished the season strong, which was good to see. In addition to that, you know, these battles, I know it's not for first in the championship. Red Bull locked that up. Max locked that up way back early in the season. But coming down to the wire for some of these battles, even down to, P7 in the drivers and, P6, 7, 8 in the constructors. We saw all of those battles come down to this race, come down to the last couple of laps in this race. That's a lot of fun to see. There's still a lot at stake in this final race. It was since Japan, I think, that Verstappen won the championship, but the rest of these guys, they're still out there fighting for something, and I think that's a lot of fun to see in the sport. We maybe didn't always get that, so it's good to see this season.
Yeah, my best surprise, and you sort of touched on this, at the start of the race, we knew who was going to finish first in the drivers and constructors, but who would finish second in the constructors? And then for fourth place in the drivers, as we touched on, there was 4 different drivers. I mean, that was fun. And so for me, the best surprise, though, was how much the drivers themselves, and we call them peacocks, we say, oh, they're all for themselves. They don't care about the teammate or team. But, George was like essentially swearing at his engineer saying, keep me posted on where we are in the constructors. Charles is on, talking to his engineer. What do I got to do to help Sergio to harm George so we come in P2? I mean, I just love that. I mean, it's like, what do we got to do to help the team?
Yeah, really, really cool to see that. I think a lot of guys are out here like that. McLaren, it was not a secure P4 in the constructors for them against Aston coming in, and Piastri and Lando did enough to sort of stave off a charging Alonso. So all those guys kind of doing everything they can for the team. That is cool to see for sure.
What was your biggest disappointment?
I think it has to be Carlos Sainz. I mean, if we're talking about $10 million for a place in the Constructors Championship, you're 4 points behind your rival there. You go out in Q1, you race like shit. That's not a good look for you. Like, your teammate is doing everything he can. He gets P2 on the day behind Max, doing everything he can to screw over George Russell. I mean, you can't get 3 points. Like, you got to do better than that in the final race of the season. You're down by just a couple of points in the championship standings. It was really, really disappointing from him, the only non-Red Bull race winner this season. And he just, the last 2 races kind of blew it for Ferrari, which is pretty disappointing.
Yeah, that's tough. I wonder, this is such a unique sport. It's man and machine, but it's also man and machine and travel. And, I mean, we talked about waking up to watch the Las Vegas race. And then, 7 days later, getting up early on a Sunday to watch it in Abu Dhabi. And, this is not a normal sport. This is not also just a normal human behavior function. And you wonder if just the Ferrari team and Carlos especially just sort of, it hit them. I mean, I don't like that we had a night race in Vegas, Saturday into Sunday, and then they fly to Abu Dhabi, and the next Sunday is another night race. I mean, that if there was ever a need for a break between races,
Mm-hmm.
I think this was it. And I don't know if that's why Carlos had such a bad race. But yeah, he did let his team down maybe in this final week. For me, my biggest disappointment was no donuts. I think only Max got to make donuts, didn't he? Charles couldn't. He wanted to. You knew Alonso wanted to. I always love to watch the donuts.
Yeah, the donuts are fun. It's yeah, I like when drivers get to do kind of the fun things, whatever they want to do. It's the end of the season. Yeah.
You know, this was the final race of the season, and we got to see a real fun battle in the constructors for P2 and P3. We got to see real fun battle in the driver standings for 4, 5, 6, and 7. But it was sewn up, as we said, very early on. It was never in doubt. That is a disappointment to me because I want there to be every race, the battle is legit for the number one spot. But having said that, and I hope that does change next year and going forward, I've long said Max is the Michael Jordan of F1, but maybe he's more the Tiger Woods of F1. I don't follow golf closely, but I know there was a period where it was considered Tiger Woods was just invincible. He was going to win if he set his mind to it, and no one was going to be close. So, the folks I know who love golf just sort of have such fond memories of when Tiger Woods was invincible. And so maybe we just take a moment and say, rather than this being a disappointment, let's just sort of acknowledge what Max has done. I mean, I saw some of these stats here. Highest percentage of wins in a season, most wins in a season, most laps led, highest percentage of laps led, most hat tricks. So, qualifying on pole, wins the race, fastest lap. 19 wins. 19 wins. That does not seem real.
19 wins is crazy.
One team winning 19 of 21, or was it 22, seems almost unfathomable. One driver getting that is just absolutely unreal. So, over 1,000 laps led, definitely the most dominant season in F1 history, and he's already got the third most wins, which is shocking. Hamilton, Schumacher, and Verstappen.
Yeah, that is amazing. I think he finished every single race this season. There's only one race where he did not podium, I believe. And, when he did podium, I think there were only 2 times where it wasn't a win. So, and his teammate won both of those.
Just amazing.
Just amazing. It's interesting. I mentioned, there's more races in a season now. It doesn't really matter too much in terms of overall statistics. But I think what's interesting is sort of now the longevity of drivers. Back in the day, drivers did not last very long in this sport, whether it was, crashing out, being injured or killed, or it just wasn't as lucrative, or whatever it may have been. Drivers now are racing a lot more than they used to, which is why a lot of these guys on the that are topping the list are more current or recent drivers. But just crazy what he's been able to accomplish. He's younger than me. It's just like ridiculous to think that he's already one of the most dominant drivers that has ever existed in the sport.
Yeah, he's said many times that he thinks about leaving the sport and maybe won't go past 30. But, Fernando Alonso's in his 40s. I believe Lewis Hamilton will be 39 soon. Lewis Hamilton has a lot of outside interests. We sort of joked it last week. He wants to cut a rap album or something. He's into fashion.
And he has a non-alcoholic tequila.
Right, a non-alcoholic tequila. But I think Max is more the Fernando mindset, where it's just this is his life. He's a lifer. And I mean, yeah, you think he's 26? Imagine him going to 14 more years in F1. It's just, this is just, I don't know, just sort of the stats, the numbers, the records he could have. Person, place, thing, or group on the virtual podium, Patrick?
This was the first race that I watched the F1 Kids broadcast. They haven't done that too many times. I think the last time they did it was in Singapore. I hadn't seen it until this race, but actually, it's very cool. They have sort of a moderator there, but then like a few kids that are doing, talking about the race, doing a lot of the sort of play-by-play script, mentioning all these different things, and they have cool graphics, and they have these interesting little tidbits of information, different facts, different sort of technical acknowledgments or whatever. And I think it's a really cool way to sort of introduce new people, not even just kids, but really anyone to the sport. They kind of went through and answered a lot of the questions that newcomers might have. What is DRS? Why are they weaving on the track like that? What do the different colored wheels mean, or tires? It's a really, I think, a good, easy, not like overly complicated way to be introduced to the sport. And, I think we always want more people to check it out, to be interested in Formula One. And I think they do a really good job on that F1 Kids of trying to get people to be interested and understand the sport and make it sort of easy and fun.
Yeah. Kids with British accents are adorable. Okay. All right. But they also are quite knowledgeable, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And the graphics are really well done.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love F1 Kids. For me, I can't top that one. So I've got a few though. That sectional and that big ass TV in the cool down room. I absolutely want that. I don't know if I could fit that anywhere, but I was like, yeah, that I want. I talked about Yuki before. On the team radio, he, thanked Franz Tost for all his support. Franz is leaving AlphaTauri at the end of the season. AlphaTauri is going through a bunch of changes. It will rebrand. They'll have new sponsors. I don't know if the distance between them and Red Bull will get further apart or not, but I thought that was real nice of Yuki to do that. And I also like the F1 rule of making sure every team lets a rookie or reserve driver get into practice, I think, for at least 2 races. And so, for Abu Dhabi, we saw F2 winner Boucher, Drugovic, one of the reserve drivers, who I think has an Indy opportunity. He may have passed that up. Pat Ward, who is an Indy driver, a very good one. He was doing practice runs for McLaren. So I thought that was great. I guess, though, which brings me to a downside of all that is watching those other drivers in practice. This was fun, but it just sort of reminded me that they, as much as I think sprints are here to stay, they need to figure that out. And I would love if they did sprints where it was the reserve drivers, for example. So we could see Sprint Saturday instead of Max and Sergio on Red Bull. It would be their reserve drivers instead of Fernando and Lance Stroll and Aston. It would be their reserve drivers, and get to see new drivers and see what they can do with that car and sort of have a mini championship. I think maybe some people think that might harm F2, but I think with Indy, with all these driver academies, I'm not so sure F2 will be as important in the future as a lot of folks think. But anyway, that was just my idea. Okay, switching to the soft compound. Have you seen the Braun documentary yet, Patrick? I have not. I still have not seen that.
I have not seen it, but I think it will be very cool. It's one of those crazy kind of stories that ultimately we're not going to get anymore in F1. It's just too expensive. But yeah, it was Jensen Button, right? That won.
Yep.
In
Braun.
2009. Yeah, just unreal. That story, and I have to imagine it'll be a very cool documentary to see.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before, where the big money, the big tech money, the big American money, the big venture capital money, F1 going full corporate, fully professional. You know, the days of the hustlers, Eddie, Frank Williams, not just hustlers, but just guys like, how are we going to put this team together? How are we going to put a car together? You know, the whole sort of new fans of the sport, I think sometimes don't even understand the notion of constructors, and maybe that has lost some of its impact.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I mean, there was a time where it's like, hey man, how are we going to put this? We don't have cash to pay the driver. We don't have an engine that will run. You know, and these guys just hustled and built a car. So I think you're right. I want to watch that, even if they do a poor job, almost just sort of out of sentimental reasons of you know, what was possible and who helped sort of build this sport into the global force it is today. Speaking of television, Patrick, now we done been told, our listeners, that Gunther Steiner of Haas might make a better TV personality than an F1 team principal. I mean, you look at Haas's results, the last 5 years, 9th, 10th, 8th, 10th. This is not good. But Gunther is good on television. And we said the team owner, Gene Haas, should fire him. And, you know, maybe Netflix will hire him and do like a sort of a fun travel show. Well, there's now rumors that CBS, the American TV network, has hired him, and he's going to help contribute to sort of an F1 behind the scenes workplace comedy. What do we think of that, Patrick?
That sounds like more 10th place finishes for Haas. I don't know. It's good for Gunther, I guess. I just can't believe that he is still working at Haas. It's 10th place again.
Yeah,
this season. They have good, solid drivers. The car is shit again. I understand. Like, you're understaffed. You don't have the same resources, the same money as these other teams. But I don't know. Alfa Romeo was bad. AlphaTauri was bad. Williams is bad. You can't compete with them?
Right.
Come on.
And they got better. I mean, maybe not Alfa Romeo, but the other guys did get better. I mean, they're nearing what, 7, 8? I mean, they're nearing a decade in this sport. Maybe Gene Haas is just thinking, hey, this Gunther fellow was the guy who convinced me to put money into F1 and get an F1 team. And ever since I did that, look at the value of his team, look at the value of F1. It's just gone up and up and up and up. And so he's probably just like, hey, the money's coming in. I'm fine with this. But, the Haas name is on that car. And I don't want to be mean. I don't want to get somebody in trouble. I don't want to get anybody fired. But if I did, it would be Gunther, because I think his time is up at Haas.
Yeah.
I guess sticking with a television theme, I caught this F1 documentary on CNBC Business Network. Pretty much it was on the business of F1, and it's really hit on the theme that we discussed this past couple of seasons, which is I know the Europeans and especially the Brits don't want to hear this, but Liberty Media bought F1, and they are basically committing F1 to the NFL playbook of revenue sharing, of figuring out ways to sort of embed competitive parity across all teams, of sort of getting it on multiple sports networks and a streaming service, of really sort of embracing social media. I mean, they're really following the F1 playbook, and it's working. It's working for them. I mean, the value just keeps going up. The fan interest keeps going up. Viewership keeps going up. Why not do it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that turns off a lot of American fans and probably many other fans in the world is, the same person, the same team constantly winning over and over and over and over again. It makes things less interesting or exciting. I know we have a lot of fun watching those other battles for 2 through 10, 2 through 20, whatever it is. But for a lot of people, that's not good enough. They want competitive parity at the top. And since Liberty Media took over F1, they've really brought a lot of the competition closer. And I think that makes things more interesting, more exciting, and more fun. And I think that has brought a lot more fans, a lot more interest to the sport. And I expect that to continue. And I expect to get back to times where it's not just one team sitting at the top for many, many seasons. So, I think this is all a good thing for the most part for the sport.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree. I think it kills that romanticism. The notion that Frank Williams can start a team or Ross Brawn can build a car that can win, or drivers putting their lives on the line. It's gotten so safe, so rich, but it's also just better drivers, better cars. Max and Red Bull aside, increase the competition. So I like that. Now, we've talked about Logan Sargent a few times. He's the only pseudo-American driver. He's also the only one technically not under contract for next year. I don't know if he did enough this year, his rookie year. I don't know if he did enough this race, the final race, to sort of secure that seat for next year. But, there were a lot of drivers, I think, that were repeat disappointments, I'll call them. Kevin Magnussen, he's done nothing. Hulkenberg has showed him up almost every single race. Joe, I know it's no fun at Alfa Romeo, but, Bottas is just, it's not really much of a battle over the course of the season. And we've already mentioned Lance Stroll. I mean, he cost the team $10 million. He cost them 4th place. He's just distant to his teammate Fernando Alonso. It's a tough sport.
Yeah, it is rough. A lot of those guys had a tough time. We didn't even mention Nick DeVries, who started the season for AlphaTauri and did not finish, obviously. He was a rookie, got booted pretty early on in the season for basically being a disappointment. They really expected him to do a lot better, and unfortunately he did not. That said, Logan Sargent on a 20 driver grid finished the season 21st. So that's pretty tough when your teammate finishes 13th.
Yeah.
I It's hard. I heard the interview after this race with James Voles, the Williams team principal, and he had a lot of praise for Logan Sargent, but obviously did not commit to any kind of new contract for next season. I think Logan Sargent really tried hard at the end of the season to kind of cement a place in F1. I just don't think he did enough throughout the season to really warrant him coming back. We've seen other guys, rookie drivers, young guys, come through over the course of the last several seasons and really never find their footing, never perform, especially for these kind of bottom tier teams. Haas, Williams, we've seen Latifi. He spent way too long in F1, and Sargent ended up replacing him and didn't do a whole lot to help the team or improve the team. Guys like Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin through Haas came and went because they didn't perform well enough. It's a tough sport to get into and to hold your position, especially at these teams at the back of the pack. But there are other guys that are performing well in the same vehicles. I mentioned Alex Albon. He did enough to get Williams up into P7, I think, in the constructors. And if you're his teammate, you got to come in and at least out-qualify him one time, at least out-race him one time in 22 races. And Sargent wasn't able to do that, unfortunately.
Across the line, that is where we predict the top 5 for the next race. If we get our choice correctly, we get 1 point. If we get them in the exact order they finish in, I always get this wrong, we get 3 points. The next race there is no next race. This is the end of the season, Abu Dhabi. But Patrick, I am curious, how did we finish? Who came in first? Who came in second?
This was down to the wire. After Abu Dhabi, final race of the season, I took home the win, 79 points to your 75. I have to say, there was one race, I think it was Qatar. There were some post-race penalties where we ended up deciding we'll go with the points, the standings from before those penalties were enforced.
Right, because we don't.
You would have beaten me by 2 points if we did the other way. So
wow, how
it was close.
Is that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. So, but no, we agreed we were going to go by the driver standings rather than sort of, be like the mean old stewards and say, oh, your plank is, a fraction of a millimeter to them. Wow, 79, 75. That was great. Yeah. And it was, I always have, even though I can't explain it to any of our listeners, it's fun. We predicting the top 5 for the next race. Mm-hmm. And if I choose someone, you can't. Once they're chosen, they're off the table. And if they come in the top 5, we get 1 point for each person that comes in the top 5. If we get them in the exact order, like if I say, oh, I think Charles Leclerc will take second, and if he comes in second, we get 3 points. It's an easy game to play. I don't know why I always struggle week in and week out to actually explain it. But that's great. Over the 20 plus races, you win 79-75. And had we gone with the stewards' mean old disqualifications of Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, I would have won. That's awesome. Any crazy predictions for the off season or even into next season, Patrick?
My crazy prediction, maybe not necessarily for the off season or even next season, but I think by 2026, we are going to add 2 more North American races, one in Canada and one in the US. I'm thinking
Wow.
probably in New York and either like Vancouver or Toronto.
Toronto already does an Indy, and
Maybe
they
like
have
Ottawa. I don't know. Could be interesting to do the capital.
right. I mean, they have land. They can put an F1 track somewhere, you know. Um, that would be amazing. Right now we have 3 in the US, 1 in Canada, Montreal, 1 in Mexico. You were saying by 2026 wait, that's
Add 2
5.
more.
That's 2 more. That's 7
Yeah.
total.
I mean, there were eight or 9 races in Europe, this season.
And
Five
that
and
was like,
5 in the
yeah,
Middle East, right?
yeah,
I
7
think
in
it's
old Europe, and yeah, that's all right.
seven in big ass North America. I think
Right.
is like totally reasonable.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Um, Super. I don't know if I have any crazy predictions for the offseason. We've talked about how hard it is to keep your seat, how hard the sport is. This past week, there were all these rumors that someone from Lewis Hamilton's team, because all these drivers have a team, reached out to Red Bull, inquiring
That's
about
right.
an open seat, maybe taking over Sergio, which, as rumors go, that's an absolutely fantastic one. Because Mercedes fans hate Red Bull and Lewis Hamilton fans hate Red Bull and Max Verstappen. But imagine that.
That would be
Okay.
quite fun.
That would be. And I think the rumors are completely true, but I think they were the obvious rational reasons behind them. I think Lewis probably had his father just put in a nice, hey, Christian Horner, I'm checking up on you. How you doing, man? But it was just sort of gauge interest, but just to put a little bit of fire under Total Wolf's feet. Like, hey, let's sign this deal. Give me more than even your top line estimate was. Maybe get rid of a couple of the guys who've delivered a car that really isn't to my liking or anyone's. But let's run with that and make a crazy prediction that next year Mercedes gives Lewis another dud of a car. Sergio has another dud of a season at Red Bull, and Lewis jumps ship to Red Bull.
Nice. I actually just thought of another one.
Ooh, let's hear it.
I think that, Lewis got the better of George this season in that Mercedes team. I think George is not going to be very happy about that. I think he's going to embrace his inner villain, and he is going to bring Angela Cullen into his team and really throw Lewis off his game. Just, make it the most irksome, like angry garage there is. He's going to be a villain, and he's going to just really take it to Lewis at the beginning of next season.
I love that.
With Lewis's former, I don't know what to call her, trainer, whatever. Aide. Angela
Spiritual
Cullen.
guide. Who knows what she was, but
I
Lewis
don't know.
and her, yeah. Oh, that's a good one. I mean, he's an F1 driver. He drives for Mercedes. He's handsome. He always dresses well. So of course I hate him. But that would be a great one. All right. I want to remind our listeners, send your questions or comments to heartcompoundpod@gmail.com. We may read them on the show, but we definitely will read them. And we also wish to thank you for listening to everybody's most beloved father and son F1 podcast. And for the 2023 F1 season, we are lights out.
See ya. Thanks for listening.
Yay. Good show, son. Good show.
Good show.
Yeah, good Lord willing, we'll be back. And we only have to wait till the 2024 season. We can do a wrap up, our favorite moments. We can do our annual Effies show. I think it's all going to be good.
Yeah.